Okay.
Okay, so we'll make a start. Welcome to our MIDAS theme seminar. Just in case anyone doesn't know me, I'm Kath Harris. I'm an information specialist with the MIDAS theme. So that's the Methodological Innovation, Development, Adaptation and Support theme for the ARC Northwest Coast. Today's seminar is being delivered by Dr Steve Wright from Lancaster University, who is an expert in the use of computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software, and he's going to talk to us about the commonalities between NVivo, MAXQDA and other data analysis software. I think Steve's going to pause at certain points for questions, so if everyone could stay on mute until we're sort of discussing questions, or if anybody wants to pop their questions in the meeting chat sort of during the session, that's fine too. And yeah, I'll hand over to Steve.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully you can all hear me okay. Just before I start, to let you know that the camera on my laptop is at the top of the keys. So periodically you might have this slightly disconcerting thing of an enormous finger reaching towards you. That's why. Okay, it's just slightly odd. And periodically you just something like, whoa, I got a minute. I thought I'd warn you of that. So yeah, so this session, I mean, this came up from me participating in a previous session and flagging up at a couple of points when people were talking through systematic reviews. It's like, oh, you can do that really effectively in NVivo. There was another participant who was a big fan of MAXQDA. And then there was a sort of interest across from several people saying, actually, could we have something about, well, what's the difference? What do they do? And so on. So, okay, so let's have a look at where we're, sorry, bear with me. I've got quite a lot of things here. So I'm just trying to make sure I can get actually to my presentation. Ah, brilliant, right. It's just a bit slow. Come on, right. So I have permission from a colleague to share this because I was like, that's exactly what I need to kick off my presentation. This is what a lot of systematic reviews look like. Piles of paper on the floor, piles of paper on a desk, lots of use of highlighters, and then copying and pasting stuff into Excel. So I'm going to start out with the key messages, right? My key message is Excel is for numbers, okay? If it's not a number, it probably shouldn't be in Excel. Excel is really good at adding up numbers, but it isn't designed for, it isn't very good at, and it's not particularly helpful for managing text. Copy paste into Excel seems to be a default approach because people know how to do it. But what you end up with is you strip content from context. So yes, you might grab the bit of information that you think is relevant, but it's very hard to go back and see, well, hang on a minute, did they mention anything else? Then you've got to go and find that paper, which might be on the floor and so on. And I mean, Excel, yes, it will lay things out in a grid, but the grid is kind of an end point, not necessarily the start. So there is software to really, really effectively manage this. I mean, systematic reviews use a lot of software earlier on in the process. There is more in common between these different QDA packages than there are differences. So to an extent, this is about using a package rather than which is the best, but I will come on to some differences between them. The actual principles and the good practices are platform independent. Using QDA software effectively is the same principles across any package. That's why I have accreditations across Atlas TI and NVivo, which I use extensively, and I'm running a lot of training on them. But I also have accreditations from MAXQDA and Quirkos because they're like, yeah, you'll pick up the subtle changes in the new version quite quickly. Actually, what I get is how do you effectively use software? And there was an idea that it's like coding in QDA. So I think a lot of people, they've encountered these things only in the context of either grounded theory or thematic analysis. Oh, well, I'm doing a systematic review. It's not that. It's like, no, what these packages do is tag data. That's it. That's all they really do, is you attach a tag to something and say, this bit of data is in that conceptual category. Another thing that has changed, and this is a really big change, and it's evolved over the last few years, is that you are no longer locked in. It used to be the case if you used NVivo, you had to use NVivo, and there was no real way of getting data out. But there is now an interoperability standard. It's been adopted by almost all the packages, which allows you to share and export a project from NVivo to Atlas TI to MAXQDA. Now, you will lose stuff, and things will change, and there are some, I can show some of the things that happen as a result. But the headline from that is you aren't locked in, your data isn't locked in, and there is a way of archiving and recoverable in a standard format. So where does this come into a systematic review process? Well, you've got your initial review question, a topic, the searching and selecting of studies. That's all happening outside of this. The appraising quality, potentially, that is more likely to be done in something like Distiller SR, Covidence, one of those programs where you will bring in a vast set of potential literature and screen it. But do we want to do more with this? Once you have full papers in EndNote or in your reference management software, so once you've done that initial filtering, that is potentially where the QDA package will come in. But the fundamental point is at this one, when you're analyzing the quality of the studies, assessing the applicability, you're extracting the data, you're synthesizing it, and you are getting your draft reports ready and your outputs all the way through to reporting. So something else about packages like NVivo, Atlas TI, they are often the best places to do the draft writing, because they have the ability to write draft segments of a report and directly connect that writing to the evidence that supports it. So they are doing a lot more than just coding, or they have the potential to do a lot more than just coding. So why would you bother using a QDA package? Sorry, it's a slightly text-heavy one, but within a data extraction tool in a systematic review, such as Covidence, or the manual copy and pasting, CACDAS software, so that's computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software, it maintains a link from the extracted data to the original full text. So you can go back to the source and context and just see if actually in a later paragraph, do they give more details about the population? Is there some other qualifying thing there? They have very powerful, very flexible tools. So they allow you to code a full text paper against a review protocol. So what you can do with this software, and I'll be trying to show you this, is you can import directly from something like EndNote, something like Mendeley, if you've got all of your papers there in your full text. You can systematically extract the data. You can export that data, your findings, out to standard formats. So you can export to Excel, you can export to Microsoft Word. You have this link back to the original context, and you can integrate other sources. So the one I'll be showing you in a second had two sources. It had some full text, and it also had some papers that were had already been done in another stage of the study, which had been extracted into Excel, but those could be brought together. Likewise, if you're doing something like a living systematic review, where you've done your review, but you're going to keep the search running, and whenever any new paper is being published that falls within the search criteria, you're going to keep updating it. You have the potential to kind of keep adding to these. And there are really good tools for writing. So you can make contextual notes, make the equivalent of notes in margin. You can link and quote examples, and you can write your draft report segments with examples. So all of this is what I'm going to show you. I'm going to just, so let's jump straight in at this stage, because this is all a little bit abstract. So I'm going to start with Atlas TI, because Atlas TI is where this project started. It was the first one it was developed in. So if you don't know the software, you'll hopefully see that there's more in common than there is difference. So within Atlas TI, you can say import from reference management data, and you can choose. So you export from EndNote, Mendeley, any of these, and you can then say, right, I want to bring in all of the papers. And so I should have another export kicking around. It won't be directly relevant, but a bit odd in this context. I could then say, actually, what would be useful is to create some sets based on the year of publication and the type. And I'm going to click import. And if I haven't moved everything around on my computer too much, it should bring in not only the PDFs, because all the PDFs are held in EndNote, but it will also bring in some data about each document as well. So you can keep the additional reference information with it. Now, this is high risk. I'm actually trying to do this live. Never, ever, 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 ever demo anything live. That is, if there is one thing that you learn from teaching, it's that. So what that has done is it has brought in not only, it's brought in the PDFs. This is actually different. So there we go. So there is a way, basically it's very, very simple. All of these packages have this as an approach. So you get your stuff together, you choose your papers that you want to read in full text, and you can export from EndNote, Mendeley, whatever you're using, into here. Now, so this was an actual systematic review. It is being published. It was a scoping review. So there were a set of documents. Some are full text. Some had already been done and the data was in an Excel spreadsheet. So I'll just show you the difference. So if you had, say, a team of people and somebody was like, look, I don't know how to do this. And I'm not going to learn it. I'll just copy and paste the relevant bits into Excel. That's fine. You can integrate it. This came from an Excel spreadsheet and was just brought in. So in order to do the data extraction, a set of codes were created. So here are the codes on the side here. Now, a code structure was created. I'm just going to try and flick back to PowerPoint at this stage. So this was the top level of the review framework. So if you were doing PCOS, you would do 0P, 1 for interventions, control, outcome, study type. For this one, the protocol was study description. Within study description, so here is the review protocol. This is what we're looking for. And that was translated into a set of pretty simple codes. You use numbers to keep them in order, otherwise they're going to go to alphabetic. And CPO is harder, COP is harder to figure out because you're like, hang on, no, I want PCOS, please. So within the software, what you see here is structure of coding, study descriptions, within study descriptions, aim of study, and at a basic level, read through the paper, you find the lead author details, you select the text, and you apply a code. So this paper has been comprehensively coded for population. What were the exclusion criteria? What was the study description? What was the intervention? So what you're doing is you're going through a paper, marking it up. You can also mark up and code data that's coming from Excel, And if I then, at a very simple level, double click that code, it will show me across all of the data what was the aim of each of these studies. So I can then read what was the aim of the study, and in Atlas TI, I can then make a comment about, if I want to add an additional comment about that bit of data, just to go, oh, hang on a minute. CBT is... So I can, what's really nice here is I'm now reviewing across all of these, that text. This is a bit like copying and pasting into Excel. But the big difference is if I'm like going, hang on a minute, yeah, I bet there's something else. I can double click and it will jump me to that part of that paper to go and read it and just see the context. So is there additional text afterwards that's important? Yeah, actually, that's the aim, but it goes. So that's one of the big differences compared with copying and pasting, is you've got all of the advantages, but now what I can also do is make notes, review everything together, and start to, you know, compare and contrast across all of my data. So you can create a coding structure, fairly straightforward. You've got a review protocol. You can predefine these codes. And under each one, you can add an additional layer of code. So we can say, right, the top level study description. Within study description, there is the aim, the analytic approach, and all of these things. There are also other things that you might not copy and paste, but might be very relevant to the analysis and the synthesis. So, for example, if you're reading through the papers and the people are starting to use metaphors or phrases, or they talk about the themes they found, what perspectives were there, what organizing. So these are more, especially if you're working with trying to synthesize qualitative data. This stuff, yeah, it's a bit hard to copy and paste into an Excel spreadsheet. What are you going to do? You're going to grab like 5 different bits where they use a metaphor. That's where a little bit more flexibility becomes useful, that you can start reading through this. And we could, so if you've got something that's very, very kind of, you know, this is a very, very more quantitative approach, but within this, disengagement, latent variable, support seeking, these all look really relevant. So we might want to code this, and I can create a new code saying, and I'm literally going to create one called this. And at the moment, I'm going to say, there's a new code. So I'm just sort of saying, you know, these are useful qualitative descriptions of items used as quant measures. Could be interesting to map to qual outcomes. Okay, there we go. Right, so what I've done is I've created a new code there. One of the good principles at this stage would be to go straight across into my code manager and say, you know what? I need a new top level code. I'm going to call this to be organized. This is basically your inbox. And I'm going, I don't know where that goes. So I'm going to put it under to be organized. Right, brilliant. So you can try and keep your coding structure clean. You can have a very, very set, clearly organized one. And then every so often, you're going to have some bits where you're like, oh, God, I don't know where to put it. Well, put it in an inbox. So this is fundamentally what the software does. So that was Atlas TI. Now, that project was then exported via this interchange format into NVivo. So some of you may well be more familiar with NVivo. This is the newest version of NVivo. This is NVivo 14. It isn't yet site licensed for any universities. They're sorting it out. It's coming out imminently. It basically looks exactly the same as release 1. At the moment, I am testing it out. So I have just double-clicked on a file and asked it to open. If you want to join me to count with me, that was pretty quick for NVivo to open a file. It will get slower. I can absolutely guarantee that. From what, I don't know if any of you have used NVivo release 1, but I recommend to students still to stick with version 12 because release 1 was so slow and so prone to crashing. But fundamentally here, we've got the same thing. The way it brings the spreadsheet in, it looks slightly different. So if I open the spreadsheet, which I have double clicked and I think it's recognized. Ah, no, now we're going into NVivo not responding. And you wait and wait a bit more. Then wait a little bit more. At this point, you start wondering if it's crashed. I find drumming my fingers doesn't help, but it gives me something to do while I'm using NVivo. Just to emphasize, all I've asked it to do is open a file. That's it. That's all I've asked it to do. Oh, it's now started thinking. Oh, it started thinking again. Ah, it's open, finally. Right, that is a single text file. This file is not big, it is tiny. It does have quite a lot of codes on it, but it is not a big file. So here we go. So this was the spreadsheet imported. Very similar. We can see within this, if I choose to turn on the coding stripes, if I choose to turn on the coding stripes, it will show me where codes have been applied. Now, one thing that happens when you export from one program to another is it doesn't actually select the text of the PDF. It tends to select a region. So that bit there is actually a region of the PDF, not the selected text. This then has an impact when you go and look at codes. So here we can see exactly the same coding structure when it finally deigns to show the code structure on screen. So yes, NVivo is the most widely used. It is the most widely available. And it appears to me as if they basically think they own the market and have decided to release new Coca-Cola, if anyone remembers that, if anyone's old enough. It's just like, yeah, you know what, maybe make your program work. So here we can double click and go and see, you know, all of the author details. So if I double click that code and wait and hope NVivo hasn't crashed, it will eventually show me that detail. you can possibly start to see why I don't like demonstrating NVivo live. Now, this is where we start to see a little bit of difference between software. That's odd. What does that mean? Well, that is what I meant about with a PDF. So if we want to see what was actually coded, we've got to click to see the PDF. And somewhere in this PDF, it's coded at the top there. I think that's the bit that's highlighted. But it's quite hard with NVivo to see what was coded if an area of a PDF has been done. So if you start in NVivo, select all the text and all that, it's not too bad. But this is one of the limits of exporting across different pieces of software. So finally, I'm just going to show you MAXQDA. Here we can see, so this is one of the bits of the spreadsheet that's been coded. You can also go and see, now I am less familiar, bear with me on this. But this is kind of hard to do with some Zoom controls in the way. View gone. So this has been coded. What I really want to do is open our document system. So here we can see PDF, and you can see quite clearly which areas have been coded. So there's the author information, lead author details. So one of the differences that you get between these pieces of software is that if we go to code system and let's go and say we want to look at reviewer thoughts, double click that. Oh, so it's opened up. Some of this is opening on the other screen, that's why. Here is everything coded to thoughts. If I click on it, we will then see at the top here, that's the area of the PDF. I can see there's some notes about it. So this is MAXQDA. It does a pretty good job of very quickly showing you the area of the PDF. By comparison, NVivo, you're a bit like, well, what bit did you code? So that's fundamentally what this software is doing. Okay, so you can bring sources in, you can select the text, and you can apply it against a coding structure. The difference between this and a much more intuitive, sort of inductive approach to maybe working with interview data is you're going to have a preset framework to code to. You're going to have a data extraction framework. You know it, but instead of copying and pasting into Excel, you are applying labels to the actual original documents. The really nice bit with it is that feature, just looking there, this is the equivalent, if you like, of the Excel spreadsheet. But you can easily make a comment about, what are you thinking about that? And that comment is then connected. That's the kind of thing that's kind of hard in Excel, because Excel doesn't allow you to have content of a cell and some commentary about that cell, and then link that cell to something else, because Excel is for numbers. This is for, here's a bit of data, here's my comment about it, and actually I want to bring that comment together and the data and talk about it somewhere else. So that's why these kind of packages can be so useful for systematic reviews. Okay, so that's a bit of a whirlwind tour to get us started. Are there any questions at this stage. So I've just been trying to introduce sort of key ideas of what these things are and what they do. So I'm very happy to pause if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask any specific questions, or do feel free to post in the chat as we go along. If there's anything you want me to slow down, show a bit more clearly, or explain. If not, I will continue, but as I say, I've got the chat and the open, so I'll keep an eye on that. So I'm assuming all of you, if you are involved in doing systematic reviews, this will be kind of covering things that you already know, but the systematic review needs management for the development of the protocol, logging the literature, and selection and initial screening. So this is not replacing the Stiller SR, Covidence, RevMan, any of those. This is about coming later in that process. But to me, there's something about, there's a process here where people have adopted software earlier in the process, but yet somehow maybe don't seem to have thought about the best software for later. So literature management software becomes really key, that once you have brought in the references and maybe screened based on the abstracts, you would be looking to link your PDFs with the selected papers within something like EndNote. So this is, again, this is something where I sometimes see these being very, very separated out. Just going to try and launch EndNote as well, but we are okay. So here is EndNote, but one of the key things here is that within EndNote you can find you can have your all your reference information here. If it doesn't have a PDF, there is always an option just to say, right, I want to attach a file. So an earlier stage is doing all of this and bringing it together in EndNote. The main thing that is somewhat limited with EndNote is if you are looking within EndNote, why don't we just use this? You can make notes, you can highlight, you can make notes within this. But you've only got one highlighter color, and you've not really got, the search is okay, but it's pretty rough. So while I can select text and highlight it, and that might be something you do at the very, very early stage, that's really important. There's a limit to what you can do here. But if you have made highlights or added notes within EndNote, within Mendeley, or if somebody at the initial stage does that, this is another one of the areas where you see a bit of difference. Atlas TI launched something and it was quite quiet. In fact, I don't know if anyone else, certainly their competitors don't seem to have picked up on what they did. You can see here there's a code called imported annotation. What is that? Well, what that is if you import PDFs from reference management into Atlas TI, it is now picking up that you made a highlight and a note, and it is actually bringing that information in with it. So that is currently, Atlas TI is doing that. NVivo have implemented this. They've literally just implemented it in their newest version, but only with Citavi, which is the reference management software that they own and they bought out. In 9 years of running training in reference management, in using this kind of software, and in technology for research. I've met one Citavi user. They were Swiss. It's quite big in Switzerland, and it's got a user base in Germany. I've never met anyone else who uses Citavi. Whereas I have met a huge number of people who use Zotero or Mendeley or EndNote, and institutional support for each of those. So if you do have, at the moment, you're thinking, well, I've made loads of notes and loads of highlights and all of that stuff in Mendeley. I want to bring that in. Atlas CI would bring that in. Nothing else will at the moment. And this is where understanding the difference between the software can be a little complex. So if you want to get things out of these, you literally would go into, here's a group. You can select those and you can say File, Export. That will. Now, depending on where you're going, you will affect this. But basically, for Atlas CI or NVivo, you would export as an XML file. For a MAXQDA, you'd export it as a text file in RIS format. So again, this is all well documented in the help, but you basically select the stuff that you want to export with the PDFs attached, and then you can bring that directly into these analysis packages. Import is pretty straightforward. There's a direct button, and you can create groups. Those groups can sometimes be really useful. For example, different years. I just want to see all the documents of the year. And then again, this can inform the later analysis. So it's worth thinking about these before you do it, because if everything is a journal article, don't bother creating a group for journal articles. If everything is in that group, it isn't a useful group. But if you were interested in comparing, for example, so yesterday I was working with somebody who was doing a systematic review with 3 different types of data. They've got kind of news reports, they've got actual case law, and they've got legal opinions. So the press coverage and the press releases are kind of illustrations in practice, but really they're doing a systematic review of legal cases and legal opinions. So for them, it's going to be really important to see what came from a legal opinion and what came from case law, because they want to draw a contrast. So that would be useful to create 2 different groups. With everything that you're bringing in, whenever you're bringing in documents, whether you're bringing anything into a project, it's a really good idea just to write a short comment of why it's in. You know, why was this accepted? Is it on the borderline? There might be some papers where you're like, right, this, we think so, but we're going to have to read the content. Yes, we've screened it for the abstract, but we're not sure. That would be 2 useful groups. Importing into NVivo, one thing I would really emphasize with importing into NVivo, it changes the name. It's far better to change it to author and year, because otherwise, if you import all the titles, that's not how you will refer to it anywhere else. Choose the fields to import and just review what comes in, because you will end up with a load of spurious junk sometimes. MAXQDA, again, there's just another one, import reference management data, and you can then choose where it came from. So the other thing with this is that I've already shown you one idea of this idea of layers of coding, but this applies to, if you're just doing qualitative research, this applies exactly the same. Yes, your core coding in a systematic review is going to be your review protocol, the equivalent of the columns in the spreadsheet. What was the population? What was the intervention? What was the comparison, outcome, etc. But you can be a bit more specific than an inch. But there will also be other elements you might want to code for. So for example, what do I mean by this? Well, it might be useful to select those and code them under keywords. So I would create a code for keywords. The really important thing whenever you create a code is to define what it is and why it's in the project. And that definition can be a bit loose. So there we go, we've got keywords. Now I know I need to organize that. So I will, that's okay for now, but every so often, I will go into my code manager and make sure my codes are well structured. I sometimes show a video about this. That my analogy is always, it's like chefing. It doesn't matter what approach you're doing. So we're talking about systematic reviews. This might be doing an interpretative IPA approach. You might be doing thematic analysis of qualitative data. It's a bit like chefing. If you're learning Thai cuisine, if you're learning French fine dining, if you're learning Italian, no matter what you do, keep your station clean. You always tidy up as you go, or it'll turn into total chaos. This is the equivalent of keeping your station clean. Every so often you come in here and you go, right, I better organize these. Okay. So I'm going to create something called structural elements of literature, and I'm going to put keywords under there. Right, so I've now got a new area of my coding structure, because this isn't about extracting the data, but this is just going, there were the keywords. You know what, being able to see all the keywords next to each other might be kind of useful. Did this data come from the abstract? Did it come from the conclusion? Did it come from the discussion? Again, these are elements of the paper that in some circumstances could be useful. If this was an interview, this would be the equivalent of like, right, which question are they answering? Not what theme are they talking about? How are they talking about it? All of those conceptual categories around maybe emotion or barriers or whatever it is that you're interested in. No, which question are they answering? That's structure in an interview. The case is a bit out here, but that's usually about who it is or what the publication is or who the person is. Reflexive codes are something that are there to support the interpretation. So one of the key things to remember in all of these is you can code a piece of text to more than one code. So here we've got the study description, but I might want to add another code here that just goes, sounds really sketchy. Okay, I'm going to create a code called that sounds really sketchy. It's like, no, so what you're doing here is it's a very informal code. But this is about your reaction as a reviewer to this. So you would then be adding contextual notes. So that would be within Atlas TI, it's a quotation comment. In NVivo, it would be an annotation. In MAXQDA, it would be a, I can't remember the name of it. But you're basically saying, that's the bit of text, but I'm not sure about that. This is my reaction. So you don't create a new code for every single reaction. You go, whoa, there's something a bit odd about that. So you make a note about this bit specifically. It's seems to be determined. So that anyway, I mean, you know, what I'm doing is going, hang on a minute, this sounds a lot like somebody invented a mobile app and went shopping for who's got a problem that this solution will fit. And they've retrospectively come up with something. So your feeling is, hang on, there's something really, really, really sketchy there. I'm not sure, I don't like this. That is really important because that is your reaction. This isn't about extracting data, but this is also about your synthesis, your interpretation, your engagement. So you can code for that, but one of the things you need to do is remind yourself that that sounds really sketchy. Well, I'm going to put it under to be organized initially. I'm going to give it some thought. Potentially, I'm going to rename that code. I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to rename that with a slightly more sensible name. So I'm going to say something like questionable ethos and motivations. That's what I mean. And I'm going to create a new category of codes. And I'm going to call these reflections and reactions. And I'm going to put that under reflections and reactions. It's a different type of code. It's doing a different thing, but it's still important. So this is another thing that this is quite different from working, copying and pasting into Excel. Because if you're copying and pasting into Excel, you'd have to write this somewhere else. So it would be decontextualized. But actually, your point, your concern is contextual. So you don't really want to separate that thought from its context. So the context is now captured where you're taking a load of things, you're reading across going, you know what, there's a lot of this research is problems in search of, solutions in search of problems, not problems where it's not problem led, it's, oh, and then you might start unpicking it, going, hang on a minute, who sponsored this research? Oh, this was sponsored by Microsoft, etc. And that's the kind of thing, but that's outwit. But these notes become really, really useful. So this is thinking about kind of a different hierarchy or a different set of approaches of codes. So these are some suggestions. Reflexive codes would be that's your reflections, your reactions to the data. Those will be drawn on in any sort of synthesis or analysis. And just basic project codes. One of the useful codes that I've got is I got up to here. And literally, it's like, the kids are hungry. I was working my way through this paper and literally I just got up to here. So I'm just going to mark that and I'm going to code it under got up to here. Boom, right. Next time I come back, I'm going to double click on that code and go and see where did I get up to and keep going. I then remove the code. Okay. So I come back and I go remove that coding. Fine. Keep going. That can save hours, to be honest. In other contexts, especially if you're working with working slowly and detailed through an interview transcript, that can save you so long because you just, so this is, the idea I'm trying to get across here is that codes are just that, they're just a way of tagging these documents for something that is useful for your project. Yes, you will have a data extraction framework, but that doesn't mean you're limited to that because you're not in Excel, you're not trying to copy and paste something here and fix it into a cell. You're going, hang on a minute, I can tag that, but I can also add notes, I can add all of these things. So these are several things, structural codes I've talked about. Case codes is more other coding, reflexive project codes. If there are errors, you spot typos, you see pseudonyms, or in particular for writing up, that's a confidentiality issue we need to be thinking about that. Writing up can be really useful. So I've also used codes and I've seen it used very, very well by people quite late on where they're literally just going through, just going like, right, I'm going to code that with chapter 6. Chapter 6, chapter 6, chapter 6. Why? Because I'm going to quote them in chapter 6. Done the analysis, but I just want to pull together those quotes for that bit of the report. So yeah, so you can use it with this obvious, clear protocol. You can also, with each of these packages, if I go to share, so here we're now looking at NVivo, I can export the code book in a standard format. So if you come up with, you've got a really well-established coding protocol that you want to use, and you've developed it and you've got your layers in perfectly, you can export it and use it again and reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. So that could well become a useful element to add with other bits of review protocols. You know, here are the codes we used, you can go and reuse them in another project. So there's a way of kind of enhancing the reusability of the work you've done. If you're going to move things, if there is a potential that you might move things from NVivo to Atlas DI to MAXQDA, etc., it's a really good idea to just have a couple of simple things. So your very top level codes, do them all in capitals, subcodes in mixed capitals, and 3 layers down, just all lowercase. That way it's a bit easier to see where things are. Use some numbers and some prefixes. Generally, when you export, the coding structure is now preserved. So it will show top level code, subcode, and it should show a 3rd layer. But you always want to make sure that if in doubt, you can recover it. As I said, again, there's a bit of going over it again, you know, but what can be really useful? So this is another code, a definition. If within it, something says, you know, we used a particular protocol, and there's a definition of what it is, you might code it for what it is, and ooh, that's a useful definition. Or is there a summary? So if there is a, you know, there's a really nice summary in one of the papers of this condition, you might tag that with summary, and then you'd be like saying, right, I want to just see where was the really good summary of that. And again, so as I've mentioned before, you just need to prefix them with numbers to keep them in order, because if you have spice 0, 1, 2, otherwise it will default to alphabetical order. Once you've got these things going, there are also ways of bringing together a load of codes. So if you've got a load of codes and you're not sure quite what to do with them, maybe if you're doing much more a synthesis review or working across that different things, then you might end up saying, right, I'm going to group things together. Just these are codes we need to discuss as a team, or these are I want to discuss with my supervisor. Useful sets, and these are very dynamic. So in NVivo, I could, for example, say, oh, hang on a minute, under my writing codes, I've got useful definitions. I'm going to add this to a set. It's gone off screen in a really odd way. It's hard to see. For next supervision. That one was useful. And the other thing I really wanted to chat about when, you know, the next team meeting is my reviewer notes. Now, fortunately, that's NVivo, so it's now going to think about what I've asked it to do for about 3 or 4 minutes. You can also color code things. Color codes are quite good. They allow you to group things together. But you can, so if it helps you, you can apply a code, you can change the color of the code. So we can say, right, I'm going to make all of the population ones red, all of the intervention ones are going to be light green or turquoise and so on. I quite like using reserving green, orange, and red. And I sometimes color codes like, yeah, I've got that one nailed, I'm going to make it green. Whereas this one, oh my God, I don't really know what I'm doing with that code. It's not developed yet. It's not defined. I'll make it red. So you use a traffic light system. So those are just ideas for using the colors. They can be different ways of grouping things. So how do you make a choice? The problem is it's usually the question I'm always asked is, well, which is best? It took me a long time to find an analogy. I don't know how many of you have kids, but for Atlas TI versus NVivo, this seemed to work. The Atlas TI is a lot like Lego, and NVivo is a lot like Playmobil. NVivo has more stuff built into it to just get you going. It code hierarchies, it's got a really nice framework reporting tool, and so on. So if you know what you're doing, it's a bit like Playmobil. It gives you most of the big bits, and you just quickly put them together, maybe stick some stickers on, and you've got a Playmobil castle. Atlas TI is a bit more like Lego. You've got to build that castle from the ground up. But by the way, having got most of the way through this very fixed systematic review, you decide and you realize that actually you want to go further on 20 of those papers and do a real narrative synthesis of them. Atlas TI is really good at being able to rebuild it into a different shape. But would I say one is better than the other? No, because Lego does what Lego does really well, and Playmobil does what Playmobil does really well. You know, which is better is kind of the wrong question. They are different. Yes, they're both toys. Yes, they both, fundamentally, they've got a lot in common, but you can't quite do it. But this is the flip side. I really like my analogies. Just because you've got a pressure washer and a Hoover doesn't mean you can clean your carpets with that. I'm kind of dying to try this now, but there is a tendency to go, I've got a load of papers and I've got Excel, so I'm going to add the two together and there is a nice systematic review. It's like, no, but I do see cases where people, they choose what they've got or what they know. And they try and think that if you add two things together that were designed for different jobs, it will do another job. Not necessarily. So to an extent, this is the Excel thing. But it's also one of those ones that there are some cases where there is a bit of a difference. These are given questions to consider when you are making a choice. So this is from Surrey Sociology Research Centres, where they have the CAPTAS Centre, who pull all of this data together and do a lot of work. If you're going to pick one, well, is there a package available to you at your place of work? Is there peer support? Is there any training? Yes, MAXQDA has got some lovely, lovely tools in it, and it's probably the easiest to learn. But do you have anyone else you know who uses it? And can you get anyone to help you if you get stuck? Having the best possible tool for the job that you don't know how to use, having an SDS drill but no drill bits isn't the best job if you've not got any of the drill bits for it. Actually, if you've got someone that go, yeah, and help you. So what kinds of amounts of data do you have? What's your preferred style of working? Do you have a methodology? Are you thinking thematically about the data? So this will determine the kind of review approach you're taking. Are you just trying to come up with a summary and a scope, or are you heading for a much more synthesis of stuff together? Do you actually need to really just write notes about data? Or are you really interested in the language and terminology used? And again, teamwork is an important thing. Is there a bunch of you working on this? So there are some strengths. I mean, NVivo has the widest use, the widest licensing. It's licensed at the majority of UK universities. It often has support base, training. I haven't shown you the framework matrices. I'm going to really hope I can show this, because this is one of the key outputs. So this is where everything that has been coded against each of the criteria is put into a grid against each paper in a row, each criteria. This will output an Excel spreadsheet for you when it deigns to open. MAXQDA also has a great tool for this. So within MAXQDA, I can create what is called a summary grid. And that summary grid is a very similar thing. So I can, oh, I think, sorry, let's open on the other monitor. So having done all this coding here in MAXQDA, really nice, I can pick, right, it's already done it. Here is the grid. Possible conflicts of interest. Were there any possible conflicts of interest in Zhang? No. In that. So this is literally, this is putting out what most people copy and paste into Excel. It's just all there. It does it for you. But the great thing here is I can use this tool to write a summary of that data, or to write my interpretation, my synthesis of each of these documents. So it's really powerful. So this has that, and NVivo has this thing called framework matrix, where if I choose view, associated view is, I just want to see the cell coding. Layout. Well, they've really changed this in the new version. They've got a button here that says auto summarize. It does not do auto summarizing. Okay, just to break that. You can just view the data for that that cell on the right hand side. However, I can't make out what they've done to this interface to change this view here. So, but basically this fundamentally creates the Excel spreadsheet output that that most people copy and paste into. So NVivo has that, which is often an output from a review. There's some new cloud options for teamwork, which, if they work, could, as advertised, could be amazing. So it could be really good with a team. Atlas CI is incredibly good at handling PDFs. So I've shown you that thing whereby you can import PDFs. It brings in the highlights, the notes, and all of that stuff. It's got some really nice text mining tools and tools that can help support anonymization. So it can automatically go and find everything that looks like a name, everything that looks like a place, everything that looks like an organization, and code that for you so you can check it. It was the first to do a lot of the interoperability. It does one of the best jobs with it. MAXQDA, the summary tables are really flexible and efficient. It's really good at handling PDFs. And it's pretty easy to learn. What are the weaknesses? Well, I think I've shown you that NVivo is crushingly slow. I'm actually kind of amazed it hasn't crashed during this presentation, because I usually expect it to crash every hour or two. It's very poor with PDFs by the Exchange format. So actually figuring out what bit of a PDF has been coded is really hard. And there's a load of version differences, so you can't go backwards. So we've had problems here at Lancaster where people, apparently there's no power in this table plug socket. That's not right. Bear with me. Let's see if there is a plug socket that does have power. And yeah, so, you know, like they've introduced an incremental update from version 1.6 to version 1.7, and projects won't work together. So everybody has to upgrade at the same time. Atlas CI doesn't have those nice frameworks that you see directly. You can create it, but it takes a little bit more work. The teamwork is a bit less sophisticated for bringing multiple projects together. People may not be as familiar with it. It is supported here, and we have a site license at Lancaster, but I know it isn't at other universities. And some of the way that codes appear can be a little bit odd initially, kind of like it doesn't quite show things how you expect. MAXQDA, probably the lowest familiarity and the least widespread, and I would say the least training opportunities directly available. They were very late to implement interoperability. So previous version of this presentation I did a few years ago, it was just like, right, MAXQDA hasn't done the standards, so you can't back up and export to other packages. They've now caught up. In all honesty, out of these, if I had never used any of them and I was completely new to it, I would potentially go for MAXQDA because it's quite easy to learn. If I wanted the most comprehensive and able to do some other stuff really, really well, I go that as CI. If I had to go with what the university gave me, and I really liked making cups of tea while I was doing my research, I'd go with NVivo. So that's where we are now. I'm just going to finish quickly on the future. Atlas TI and MAXQDA have both implemented ChatGPT-driven auto-coding. You can literally go, code this, and it will come up with a thematic analysis. It's ChatGPT. It doesn't tell you what or why or how, but it's there. Now, my reckoning, so on this one here, I can literally click AI coding. I can, where's that window gone? And I can, so right, please code this, boom, start coding. And this is just going to get ChatGPT to go code that for me. At the moment, I think this is a problem in search of a solution, but I would genuinely predict that within probably a year, you would be able to take a systematic review protocol, and this is what often happens, it times out. But the potential with this, something like ChatGPT should be able to read and code these kind of papers against a protocol if you showed it what you wanted first. If you said, please code descriptions of who the participants were against code of population. That's kind of where we're headed. And I would expect that that will be one of the first uses of this kind of currently kind of like, hey, we've built in ChatGPT, what are you going to do with it? That would be my guess, that that's where things are going to go. And that could have a massive transformational effect on doing a systematic review, because if you could say, I'm going to code 5 papers and then ask ChatGPT to apply that pattern to the next 500, then you can focus on synthesis. So AI, it isn't just a hype cycle, it is coming. Finally, right. So the demonstration I was given here, this has been There's a self-directed teaching data set if you have access to the Sage Research Methods data sets. That takes you step by step how to do this. If you don't have access to it, you feel free to get in touch with me and I'm allowed to share it for teaching purposes. If you're at UCLan and you want to learn more about how to do this, I am running a workshop on Friday morning at UCLan, and I'm running another one on the 7th of July, which will be online. There are also workshops with an introduction to NVivo. These are all booked by the Graduate Research School bookings and are available to both graduate researchers and staff. If you're at Lancaster University or any of the Northwest Social Science Doctoral Training Centre, so that's Manchester, Liverpool, Keele, I am running a workshop this afternoon for Atlas DI, and there are then 2 further workshops. These will be available and you can register and access those. So I will ask that either these slides or these links are distributed to the people who attended. I think I've hit literally my limit and I've basically got to go and run this Atlas DI workshop. But if there are any questions, I'd be very, very happy to take any now. But thank you for attending. I hope this has at least demystified what this sort of software is and how it can be used. And yeah, any questions? Very happy to take that. Otherwise, thank you for attending. I hope I might see some of you at some of the training I'm running, and do feel free to get in touch if you want to ask anything further from this.
Thank you very much, Steve. Does anyone have any final questions?
I think I've just probably silenced everyone with chat at the end there. If I didn't hit you with enough, it's like, oh, by the way, you're going to be replaced by AI. You're not, okay? But it is, I do think that some of these tools are going to have quite an interesting possibility in the research process, and we should be engaging with their potential, not running away scared and trying to ban them. But yes, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for introducing me, Kath. And
thank you very much. Really interesting.
Excellent. Right, in that case, I shall sign off, and I will. I'll send some links to the to the slides and everything to be distributed afterwards. So, okay. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.